Okay, welcome. So today I would like to explore with you how there is an inner process for that. Um, this is a topic that I think will be very uh, profitable for you because this is something that will help you to both uh, change those things that you don't want in your experience and to introduce those things that you do want. So it's a 2 for 1 special. You get both of those things by understanding that there is actually an inner process for whatever your experience is. So that's what we'll be exploring together today. Um, and this will really enrich your life in all kinds of ways. So it will help you to, obviously, like I've already suggested, it will help you to uh, stop doing those things that you don't really want to be doing, but you don't know how to stop doing until now. It will help you to transform those things into positive experiences that are aligned with what you actually want in your life. It will help you to actually have an easier time achieving the things that you want. It will help you to more regularly have those kinds of experiences that are actually enjoyable to you. So all of that and more will occur as a result of understanding that there is an inner process for that. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, the nuts and bolts, or whatever metaphor you prefer. Uh, Before that, I'd like to just set the intention clearly so that you can determine whether or not this is the right place for you. Because I want to make sure that you know whether this is appropriate and useful for you. So the overall intention for these meetings, and it hasn't changed. So if you've been around before, then it's basically the same intention, but it's worth repeating, is that these meetings are to support you in greater self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is one of those things that's really impossible to overstate how important it is, and yet it really gets so little uh, airplay, as it were. There's just so little importance given to that by the by the masses, as it were. So this is a place. These meetings are a place where you can be supported in that. Self-knowledge means knowledge of yourself at all levels. So it really means to know who you are. And sometimes people will stop short. They will settle for some idea of who they are rather than to actually understand that who you are is alive. Who you are is not something that can be captured in words or thought. So to know yourself is to actually be alive. So it's not just to define something and say, well, now I know it. I got the right answer. I passed the test, and that's the end. It's actually to be fully alive. So self-knowledge is a living truth, and that living truth is at all levels of your experience and beyond experience, actually. So what do I mean by that? Well, notice that right now there are lots of things seemingly occurring. So there's the sound of my voice. There are other sounds that you may be aware of. There is if you're looking at a screen, then there's the image on the screen, and then there's all of the other images that you are aware of. So the images that you might think are the room that you're in or the space that you're in. And then also the mental images, the internal images. So what we would consider to be internal and external images. internal and external sounds. There's all kinds of sensation, feeling occurring, maybe tastes, there may be smells. So there's all kinds of things happening. And so you could be aware of all of that. In fact, you are aware of all of that. So who you are is, we could say, both that at the level of what we call awareness. So you could notice that you are aware and that awareness itself is untouched, unchanged by whatever content is coming and going. So all the content does not actually change the space of awareness. So you are that. That's true. So self-knowledge is in part to recognize that, but again, as a living reality, as a present living reality, not as something that you have ticked off the box. Well, I've had that experience, I know that, but actually for that to be a living reality here and now. So that's one we could call level of yourself. But then notice that the content is also yourself as well. I mean, certainly it doesn't seem like you can separate that from yourself. I mean, can you actually find a way to separate any of the content from yourself? Can you really say that what you're hearing is not you, or what you're feeling is not you, or what you're seeing is not you? I mean, you could as a mental exercise. And there's a certain utility in that to make the distinction between yourself as that which is, we could say, eternal or timeless, and that which is transient. So there's a utility in that, but really, fundamentally, can you actually separate them? Can they really be separated? So I'm proposing that you also exist at the level of content, but you're not exclusively defined by the content. So it's both. It's both the space of awareness and the content. And so knowing yourself is to know yourself at all these levels. It's to actually know uh, on the one sense, in one sense, to know that you are deeply safe. To know yourself as this space of awareness is to know that you are profoundly safe because you can't be touched by anything. None of whatever the content is that passes through can actually do anything to harm or to enhance the space of awareness. So that's one level, to know that profound safety. Then there's also all of the content, which is where most of us have learned to live most of our lives, is at the level of the content. So we identify as all kinds of things. And we struggle with all kinds of things at the level of content. So to know yourself or have self-knowledge at the level of content is to actually start to understand how you are creating that, how you experience it, so that you can have mastery rather than feeling that you're a victim, rather than feeling that the circumstances that are occurring are somehow a problem for you. So this is also an important level. So both levels are important. And so these meetings are intended to support you in self-knowledge at all levels. So it's not just to know yourself as this timeless, eternal, boundless space of awareness. It's to know that and to know your powers of creation so that you don't get lost in it. So that maybe you can even perhaps experience some kind of joy or happiness. Not just the temporary joy of happiness that comes from this sense of, oh, I got the thing that I wanted, because that comes and goes, and that's dependent upon getting the thing that you wanted, but rather a different kind of joy, a joy of knowing that this is your creation. So it's your happiness is independent of the circumstances because of that direct knowledge. So that's the context. That's the intention for these meetings. And so, as I said today, I'd like to explore with you that there is a process for that. And what I mean by that is both that there's a process for what it is that you're presently experiencing or doing, whether you like that or not. And also that there's a process for what it is that you would like. So there's a process for everything. And it's not something that I hear a lot of people talking about. Not that I listen to a lot of people, I guess. So maybe a lot of people talk about it, but it's not something that comes up commonly in conversations that I partake in or that I overhear. Doesn't seem to be a commonplace kind of thing. What I notice uh, is more commonplace is for people to uh, talk about how the external conditions and circumstances of their lives are problematic for them and how they want to change the external conditions and circumstances of their lives so that it will be more agreeable to them. And a lot of the time that amounts to, well, sometimes there's a lot of scheming involved. So you could just notice that if you've ever done this in your life when you thought that external conditions and circumstances dictated your happiness or your okayness. And if so, then you could notice that most likely there then you started to do a lot of scheming. It involves usually a lot of thinking, a lot of worry, a lot of strategy for what to say and what to do in order to manipulate things so that maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, the circumstances and conditions of your life will work out in a way that will meet your expectations. And it seems like that's pretty commonplace. It seems like that's the norm. It seems like that's how most people live their lives. And certainly it was the way I lived my life for a very long time. I didn't know any better. Nobody really told me that there was another way. Nobody had told me, at least not in a way that I really understood, that this was that my experience was actually the result of an internal process. So the discovery that there is an internal process that uh, produces your experience and that your experience is entirely the result of an internal process and that it's not dependent on external conditions or circumstances is revolutionary, actually. And when I say that, I don't mean like I'm not starting a revolution. I don't mean that at all. I just mean it can be the start of an internal revolution for you. So it's just that this knowledge, when you actually receive it, begins to produce a change in you so that you cannot really go back to the old way of being a victim in your life any longer. So actually, just this knowledge to starts a process of empowerment with you. So if that's not something you're interested in, then I guess you've been warned and you could maybe tune out. But if it is something you're interested in, then good news. It's available to you. And it's not something that's in the distant future. It's not something that you have to go to, to seek out a master in the Himalayas in order to discover. I mean, I suppose there may have been a time when that was the only way for most people. But it does seem that things have changed quite a lot in the last few decades. So things are much more available to us now. And so we can actually, we don't even, this is more good news, which is we don't have to use past precedents in order to determine what's possible for us. Because actually something is available to us now, right now, that we didn't know in the past that we had access to. So we really can start to live a very different life starting from today with this knowledge. So this knowledge that everything is actually an internal process, that everything is the result of an internal process, uh, is is quite different from how most of us have grown up thinking and believing. So unless you're quite extraordinary in that regard, then it might be somewhat shocking, actually. And so I would suggest that you don't try to fit this into what you already know. Because that's a mistake that oftentimes we make, is we try to fit something that's actually really new and radical into what it is that we already think we know. And then even if we get something valuable from that, it's just a triviality compared to the real richness that's actually available to us. Whereas if you're willing to just set aside everything that you think you know and actually receive the fullness of what it is that's available, then you can receive the totality of that rather than just some tiny little fraction. So consider the possibility that this is really a radical new message, even if you think you already know it. So consider then, start with something that you're unhappy with in your experience. Just bring to mind something that you're unhappy with in your experience. So whatever that may be, anything. So really anything at all. So it could be like a habitual, compulsive behavior that you wish you didn't do, but you haven't been able to stop. Or it could be some kind of repetitive way of thinking that you haven't been able to stop yet. Or it could be some kind of irritation that you experience repeatedly in response to certain situations or people. Or it could be some kind of goal that you have been trying to achieve without success. Could be anything. So I don't want to limit you in any way. Just whatever, something in your life that you're unhappy with. Now, notice that you've had some kind of story about this. You've had some kind of story about it. Maybe you haven't brought a lot of awareness to the story that you tell yourself, and maybe you have. Maybe you have a lot of familiarity with the story that you tell yourself about it. Maybe you're so familiar with it because you even tell other people about it. Sometimes it's like that, right? Sometimes we not only tell ourselves the story, but we tell other people the story. And sometimes we kind of keep it very close to the vest. We don't tell other people. In fact, we sometimes don't even tell ourselves what we're telling ourselves. So it's kind of a little bit secret from us. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that there is some kind of story that you tell yourself about it. So what do I mean by a story? What I mean is that you tell yourself that, well, first of all, you can say something about it, right? So whatever you say about it is a story. So you say, well, this is the name of this feeling. This is the name of this situation. This is what it's called. You know, I feel this way when these things happen as a result of this. So that's all a story. So just notice the story that you tell yourself about it. Now, just that story itself is a process. So the story that you tell yourself is a process. It's so that's part of the process that you use in order to create that experience. I mean, notice that as long as you tell yourself the same story, you pretty much have the same experience, more or less. I mean, you know, if other people, I mean, I'll give you an example. Like I used to have, I thought I had this big problem with the sounds. You know, it's just ooh, some sounds. I just wanted to crawl out of my skin. You know, it was just like I'm desperate to find some way to avoid those sounds. I felt so terrible. I didn't want those sounds. Uh, and you know, it could be, there's a lot of different sounds, a lot of different sounds. So I had a story that it was, you know, sounds were causing me pain. Sounds caused me problems. So long as I had that story, I kept having the same problem. So that was part of a process. This is part of the process is the story is going to keep that, it provides a structure for that process. So just notice that when you have a story, it limits the way you think about it. I mean, if so in that scenario, when I thought these sounds are problems for me, then that limited the way that I was able to, in those moments, think about my actual experience. So I was not noticing everything that was outside of the structure of that story. So if it didn't fit into that narrative of sounds are problems for me, then I couldn't think about it. I couldn't see it. I couldn't understand it. It didn't in any way enter into my reality. And yet, actually, there's an enormous reality outside of the one that I was living in. And the answers for my problem were where I was not looking. They were outside of the story. Because I exhausted that story. I had tried and tried and tried and tried and tried to find answers within that story, and lo and behold, they just were not to be found. So the story is part of the process. And then we can even become more aware of it. So you could notice that the story is normally we tell the story in an auditory fashion, like it's a narrative, so we say words and string them together. Uh, Not always. Sometimes people will tell stories visually. Sometimes people tell stories other ways, but oftentimes it'll be auditory. But notice that there are other sensory components to the process, the internal process that creates this experience. So you could be aware of whatever you see, whatever whatever you're imagining or remembering or projecting visually. So if you and now for all of this, it really is useful and important to slow down. So sometimes because we're so fast paced, we might uh, tell ourselves, "Oh, I can't do this. It's too hard. I can't notice anything. There is no story. I'm not seeing anything. I'm not hearing anything. There's no process. It all just happens, and woe is me." Which, by the way, is more of the process. You see how that works? So if you ever find yourself doing that, where you say, "This doesn't work for me. It's all just happening. I can't make any changes." That's also a process that involves a story that you tell yourself. So to become aware of it, it's useful, I would say necessary to slow down. So just be willing to slow down within yourself. So how can you slow down? Well, it's useful just to become aware of yourself here and now. So that will really help to slow down. So you could, for example, notice that your body is making contact with whatever it's making contact with. So you can notice all the points of contact. Like you could notice if you're sitting on something, you could notice that contact of your body with whatever you're sitting on. If your feet are on something, you could notice the contact of your feet with whatever your feet are making contact with. You could also notice contact of your clothing with your body. And you could notice the contact of your own body with your own body. Like if your hands are touching your thighs or something like that, you could just notice that contact. So you can become aware of your body making contact. You can become aware also of your body making contact through breathing. So just notice the breath occurring. There's no need to try and make anything happen. You don't have to force anything. Just be aware of what is. So you can just be aware of what's already happening. Just be aware of the breathing that's already happening. So there's contact with the air, contact with your interior. So you could notice that. You could allow yourself to be really just still. So to be still means not to try and force anything, but really to ease into it. So just to relax and notice any impulses to move, and then just allow those impulses to come and go while you just relax into being still. And as you do so, of course, you may notice more sensation. You could even allow your eyes to be still. So you could just allow your eyes to rest just on a gentle focus on whatever's there in front of you, whatever's comfortable. Just let the eyes rest there. And so you can just be slowing down within yourself and aware. And this will help you to start to notice the process more. So when you slow down enough, of course, you kind of almost come to a standstill. And then on the one hand, it's really quite blissful. On the other hand, then there's no process to be aware of. So we could allow for a little bit of both. So just slow down, but maybe not so much there's a complete standstill. And then just again, bring to mind whatever that thing is in your life that you're not completely satisfied with, the thing that you're not totally happy with, maybe that you're slightly unhappy with, maybe very unhappy with. And from this state of being more slowed down, again, notice the process. And there's no rush. You can just kind of step through it. Notice all the details of what's there. So there will be maybe mental images. Maybe there'll be a narrative, maybe certain feelings. And they're put together in some kind of sequence. And it's possible that this is the first time that you've ever really noticed it in this way, and yet might find that it's remarkably familiar because it's a process that you've probably been repeating a lot, even if you were not conscious of it. And so the outcome of this process is exactly the thing that you don't want. So if you were to follow the process through to the end, then it would take you exactly to what you don't want. Because that's what it does. That's what the process does. So I can't tell you exactly what your process is because it's your unique process, but I can tell you some things about it, which I've already said. So the process is going to involve some combination of sensory data, which is put together in a particular sequence. And it's encoded to produce a particular outcome. It's like directions. Do this, do that, do this next thing, take this turn. And then you end up predictably, reliably in the same destination because as long as you follow those directions, it will always take you to the same place, barring divine intervention, which is a thing that does happen, thankfully. Otherwise, we just pretty much stay stuck. So, having awareness of this process allows you to do something really remarkable. You don't have to wait for divine intervention to change it for you. you can actually produce the change. So, for example, if if you notice that early on in the process, you uh, use a particular mental image, which is usually, I mean, the mental image, if it's something that if the outcome is something you don't want, usually the mental image in such a process will be one that is a non-resourceful image. What do I mean by that? I mean, usually it will be an image where you see yourself or you see something that indicates something that you don't like. Something you might see yourself as weak. You might see yourself as a failure. You might see yourself doing the activity that you don't want to do. You might see yourself in various ways or see certain conditions, which then result in typically the strategy will usually for most people the process will be that certain images will then lead to certain feelings. It's not going to always be the case, but oftentimes that will be the way it works. Usually, oftentimes it will be encoded that way. So certain image, non-resourceful image leads to unwanted feeling state, which then usually leads to unhelpful thinking, maybe more unhelpful images and so forth. So if you happen to notice that part of your process involves these kinds of images that are not helpful to you, you could replace them. So like I'll give you an example. So and I had no idea I was doing this at the time, but I had at one time I had a real terror of many things. Among them was sugar. Now I've said this before. I know that's insane. I knew it was insane then. So I guess I was not insane, but I couldn't shake it. I was really uh, afraid of sugar. And so I didn't want to think about sugar. I didn't want to see sugar. I didn't want to have anything to do with sugar. I didn't want to hear about sugar. And as you could imagine, that was stressful. So I got to a point where I realized, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. This is really, really painful, miserable. Can't go on like this. Really, really stressful. And so like I said, I didn't really know at that time what I was doing. I didn't really have any outer guides to support me in that process. Um, but I was blessed to discover internally some ways that were helpful to me. And so I introduced a new image. So I wasn't even aware at that time consciously that I was using images, unhelpful images as part of my process. In retrospect, I was obviously it was flashing these images in my on my mental screen of, me being overwhelmed by scary sugar, like it's ridiculous, but we can do a lot of crazy things to ourselves with our own internal processes, right? So like, like I mean, think about it. People, some people, so some people are afraid of spiders. Some people are afraid of bees. Some people are afraid of whatever, the different things, right? So not everybody's going to use exactly the same process there, but oftentimes it will involve some kind of image. Now, is a bee all that terrifying? No. But can a person create a mental image that is terrifying to them? Absolutely. Might that be an image of, some kind of huge, terrifying bee? Maybe. Or it might be an image of themselves, swelling up and dying? Maybe. I mean, who knows? All kinds of variations, lots of ways to do it. But uh, we can create these really terrifying images of things that are not terrifying, right? So somehow I created these terrifying images of sugar. And now, is sugar terrifying? No, of course not. But I created images that were terrifying. And then I had really unpleasant sensations, but I wasn't aware of the process. So I lucked into this, I guess you could say, or I was blessed to, um, without any external guidance, I replaced that image without even knowing what the image was that I was replacing. I replaced it with another image. I conjured up consciously this image of diving into a swimming pool filled with sugar, and it was just, and then I was just, made it into like something delightful. So I replaced the image, and then I had a different outcome. Now, I'm not saying that you have to create an image that's absurd like that. In fact, I would say, not knowing what I know now, I wouldn't even recommend it. I would say instead, it's really simple. Just create an image, a resourceful image of yourself. So just notice how you would like to be and see that. Just see yourself as you'd like to be. And it doesn't matter, by the way, a lot of people say, oh, I can't visualize, but you can. Even if you think you can't, you can. Because if so, just even if you just think the thoughts, you're still seeing something in your mind's eye, whether you're aware of it or not. So it will still work for you. So you can just think of or imagine yourself as you'd like to be, and just notice who that person is. What are the qualities of that person? What are the inner resources that that person is connecting with? And just form an image of that version of yourself. Just notice how you feel when you do that. And then just choose to replace the unhelpful images with this resourceful image. And suddenly your process changes. Now, if you have a part of your process that is really that's more auditory, where you're telling yourself something, or maybe it's not even you telling yourself, but maybe you've got some kind of internal voice, it's not even your own, that is part of your process that results in the unwanted outcome. Like sometimes we will find that you might be 50, 60, 70 years old, it's possible your parents are long deceased, and yet you might still have your mother telling you things as part of your process, right? I mean, a lot of us are doing that. We'll have, our mother, our father, some other person from the past who is telling us things that are part of a process that leads to what we don't want. So if you become aware of an auditory component that's part of your process that leads to what you don't want, then hey, guess what? You could change that. I hope that you're actually doing this. I hope you're actually testing this out. If not, then please do so. I mean, this is something you can make changes right now. You could make changes right now that can uh, make your life moving forward something very different in a very wonderful and positive way. You really don't have to be bound to the past any longer. You really can be empowered from this moment forward. And as odd as it might seem, these small, simple changes that you can introduce right now can have very significant, positive, and lasting effects in your life. But it only works if you actually do it, right? Like so many of the things that I share. So test it out. So if you notice that there's an auditory component to your process that leads to what you don't want, then you can change that. And now, a lot of the time, people focus on trying to change the content of such voices. So even when people become aware, then they try to change it, and then they get locked into this kind of battle. You know, you ever have that happen where it's like you're in a shouting match with an internal voice? You know, there's some internally there's some voice telling you something, and then you start internally shouting at it, saying, "No, you shut up. You're not the boss of me." But if you've ever done that, then you notice that it doesn't usually work very well. It's like mud wrestling with a pig. And if you don't understand that reference, then just think about it. You know, if you're mud wrestling with a pig, eventually you're going to find out the pig likes it, right? So if you're getting into arguments with internal voices, you'll probably eventually come to realize that you're really just empowering that voice. So if that voice is part of a process that leads you to what you don't want and you get into an argument with it, then you're actually just reinforcing the process that leads to what you don't want. Again, something I know all too well because I did that for years. I had so many problems. And I got so frustrated and angry, you know, because I tried so many things externally, so many things. You know, I mean, I won't give you the whole laundry list here, but it was so many things. And I'm sure you've tried many things too. And so you may have some, uh, you may be able to relate to that. Maybe feeling like I've done so much, and then it's like this internal enemy, and it's like I've tried so much. Why are you ruining my life? And and then you might notice if you've done that, then it doesn't actually change things in a positive way. If anything, it just reinforces things. So, like I said, I found that out the hard way. So I I don't think in most cases that trying to just change the content of the auditory stuff is the best approach. What usually works much better is to change the way it's represented. So, you know, if you notice that the way, if you have some kind of internal voice or internal sound that is part of a process that leads to an undesired outcome, then you might notice some things about the way that that internal voice or sound is represented. Like you might notice it has a location, and you might notice that it has a tonality to it. You might notice it has a volume to it. And if you just play around with those things, that can produce a very remarkable change. Oh, also the speed. Speed is also another one. It's amazing what changes can take place. So if you just have some kind of uh, voice or sound that is part of an internal process that leads to an unwanted outcome, and you just change the speed of it, that alone can completely change things. So you could try that out. So you could take whatever. So if there's like some internal voice that says something to you that is part of a process that's problematic for you, you could just take that and then consciously repeat it, but slow it way down. So that much, so much like I just did. So slow it way down. When you put that much space between the words, you'll notice something really remarkable happens. It changes. You can also change the tonality because there's something about the tonality that's part of the process. And if you change the tonality, then it changes. I mean, if there's some voice that's part of a process that's leading to an unwanted outcome, just notice, what does that voice sound like? Does it sound like your mother? Does it sound, you think it sounds like you? Does it sound like God? Is it, James Earl Jones? What if you change it? What if it's Donald Duck? Change it to sound like Donald Duck. Guaranteed it will change the process because the process depends upon the structure remaining the same. And if you change it sufficiently, then the whole process changes. So you can introduce these changes and disrupt the process that produces the undesired outcome. So that's the first and most important thing. If you don't do that much, then you're still going to be working against yourself, and that's going to be hard. So don't do that to yourself. Now, that addresses, at least superficially, as an introduction, that addresses changing, or first of all, becoming aware and then introducing changes to an internal process that produces an outcome that you don't want. So an outcome that is not desired. So there's a process for that, whatever it is, whatever the outcome is. So if you, like like I described, I had these, issues with sensitivity to sound. I had issues where I had fears of all kinds of foods. I had issues where I was reacting to all kinds of environmental things like smells and things like that. I had all kinds. I got easily angered. I mean, on and on and on. I had so many problems. All those kinds of problems. I had, I've had problems with just so many, circumstantial issues, relationship issues, financial issues, health issues, all kinds of things. And every single one involves a process, an internal process. Focusing on the external typically gives very limited results. In fact, more commonly, it gives more of the same kinds of results, meaning more of what you don't want. So I'm suggesting that if you encounter something in your life that you haven't been able to resolve, then please do yourself a favor and become aware of the internal process that you're using to create that experience for yourself. And then through that awareness, you can make changes to it. So step one is to slow down so that you can become aware of the internal process. The internal process consists of the various sensory data. So things that you're seeing, things that you're hearing, things that you're feeling, etc. Internally, how you're representing that, how you're processing that, how you're sequencing that for yourself. And it's like a program that then produces the outcome. And if you don't like the outcome, change what you're doing, which is the internal process. And then I've suggested to you some things that you could do. And it's just scratching the surface, but some powerful things that you can do to change that process. So I just suggested two things, more or less. One is if you notice an unhelpful image, a non-resourceful image as part of the of your internal process, then you can change that. Just replace it with a resourceful image of yourself. So you just choose, just create that image of yourself as you would like to be, and just notice that version of yourself, the inner resources that you're connected to, the qualities that you are embodying in that ideal version of yourself, and then just replace any non-resourceful, unhelpful images with that. And I know it seems like, oh, that's too simple, it couldn't work, but I promise you it will. And then the second thing I suggested is that for any unhelpful processes that involve substantial auditory components, like if there's an inner voice that's saying something that is part of your process that leads to the undesired outcome, then change that. And I'm suggesting that oftentimes it works much easier to change the structure of it rather than the content. So rather than trying to change what the specific words are, you could just slow it down, change the speed of it, change the tonality of it, change the location of it. So sometimes there'll be you know a voice, an inner voice that seems to be whispering behind your left ear. And strange as it might seem, if you just move it out in front of you, it can change the whole thing. So these are really simple things, but very, very powerful. Now, um, that, as I've suggested, is, I think, the most important first step, because if you don't do that, then you're any other changes that you try to make are going to be um, fairly ineffective, because if you're trying to produce positive changes on top of already existing processes that result in what you don't want, then most of your energy is still going to producing what you don't want. And you really are unlikely to be able to succeed in producing what you do want. It's not impossible, but it's really not an efficient way to go about it. So very useful to first address releasing and transforming the inner processes that are producing what you don't want. So I really highly recommend that as a first approach. However, once you've done that, or really at any time, I mean, you're always free to do it, but you can start to introduce processes that lead to what you do want. And that is a topic that I'm not going to try and go into a lot of detail on today, but very briefly, just understand that it's basically the same ideas, right? So there's a process, there's always an internal process that produces any outcome. So if you want some outcome, then it will be useful to put in place the internal process that leads to that. And you can approach this a lot of different ways, but one way to do it that is fairly time tested and proven is to model those who are already successful in achieving what it is that you want. So there's like we have ways of entraining to the internal processes of those around us, and that can work well. to our advantage or it can work to our disadvantage, depending on who we're around, right? I mean, so there is something about um, choosing who you are going to be hanging around. If you're not already in a position, a strong enough position to be able to uh, know yourself and be able to have sufficient mastery over your internal processes, then uh, you're you're going to be enormously influenced and swayed by those who you're around. And uh, so it is useful to just be conscious of who you are spending your time with, and to choose to be around those who are already living what it is that you want. So, this is the value of a good mentor or teacher or uh, something like that. With that said, though, you can also, to a certain extent, you can do this uh, by even if you're not even just from reading the writings of people, or even reading about certain people, or watching videos of people. So you don't necessarily, although in many cases it's ideal if you can be around these mentors or teachers who already are embodying and living what it is that you want. But a lot of the times, realistically, that's just not in the cards for us. But we can do that to a certain extent, um, by, as I said, by reading the words of those people, even just seeing even the images of the people. So to um, and then to start to you can enhance that by consciously paying attention to what is the internal process that produces in them the outcome, and you can model that in yourself. So that is something that, like I said, it just scratches the surface, but you can really do very, very amazing things with that information, with that knowledge, when you put it into practice. So again, as with pretty much all the things that I share, if you want the real results, you have to put it into practice. If you don't put it into practice, then it's unrealistic to expect that you will get the results. Um, so I really encourage you to put it into practice. And, by the way, I'll just mention briefly that, week after week, I share lots of things, and my intention is that all the things that I share are highly valuable. And you don't need to work with all of the things that I share in order to change your life for the better. So I really encourage you to choose those things which you feel that you can work with, the things where you notice the results, the things where you feel a connection and a draw to those things, where you are attracted to them, and then just commit to them and put them into practice in a way that is sustainable for you in your life. Um, when you form habits that are aligned with what you really want, then that's enormously powerful. So just choose the one, two, three things that you're really attracted to, and then commit to working with them consistently, daily. Put them into practice. Find a way to make that sustainable for you, because that's how the real results happen. if you dabble here, a little bit there, and you say, okay, I'll try this week, and then the next week I'll try this other thing, and then the next week I'll do this other thing, then um, your results will not be that fabulous. But if you take something and that works and you work with it consistently, you commit to it and you work with it every single day, you'll really see remarkable positive results in your life. It is in that spirit, by the way, that I created, or I should say, developed the uh, Manifesting Truth program. So, for those who have participated in that program, you will probably recognize that that's true, that it's designed to help create those simple, sustainable daily habits that will change your life. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It's just even a few minutes a day done consistently and sincerely, and it will change your life. So, just a little plug for those who are looking for support in that kind of thing. You may be interested in the Manifesting Truth program. It is a paid program, and I do encourage you to check it out. You can learn more at joeylott.com/manifesting truth, and I will provide the link to that in the description on YouTube when I publish this there. Um, you don't have to participate in the Manifesting Truth program to get those results, though. That's what I'm saying. It's the best program that I'm aware of. I mean, I offer the program because I know the value of not only the program itself, but the support that goes along with it, the accountability and the support and answering all the questions and all of that. So I know a lot of people fail to put these things into practice in a sustainable way for themselves unless they have that support, which is a big value of the program. But if you're the sort of person who you can uh, do that on your own and you don't need somebody to answer your questions and you're able to do that, then by all means, just get started today. Do it. Take any of the things that I share in any of these Monday talks, and if you're attracted to it and you're getting results with it, then just put it into practice every single day. And you don't have to do it for hours. That's a big mistake that people make is they think, oh, I have to do it for hours in order to get results. No, you don't. In fact, you are very unlikely to get results that way because if you do it for hours, you're probably not going to sustain that every day. And so you might do that for hours every day for a week and then you move on to the next thing. But if you just did it for 5, 10 minutes every single day, then over time that adds up. It will make an enormous difference in your life. You can't even, you really can't even imagine how huge of a difference, a positive difference that will make. So I really, really encourage that. Um, and that's all I'm going to say on these subjects for today. For now, for those who are here live, we'll stay on for the group coaching. For those who watch us on YouTube, if you're interested in joining these calls live so that you can join for the group coaching that follows, I encourage you to do so. And you can get that information by signing up at my website at joeylott.com. And you can get that just by signing up for whatever the main offer is that's on the homepage right now. And for the foreseeable future, that is the free ebook that I offer, which covers 5 of the fundamental laws that govern creation. And so it's a really valuable free ebook that I encourage you to get and read and start to make use of. It will change your life. And when you sign up for that, you'll also get the information for how to join these meetings live. And when you do so, you'll be eligible then to stay on for the group coaching that follows these talks. The group coaching is an opportunity for any questions that you have, or if you've got any issues that you want some support with, and we can address that uh, in a group setting. I'm happy to give you some coaching through that during the group coaching sessions. I think that's it. So for those watching on YouTube, blessings to you and bye for now.